Hello. This is a daycare centre in Thornley Bank on the south side of Glasgow. My daughter Katrina comes here 2 days a week. As you can see, she spends part of her time playing. She also works on her speech, on visual recognition and on social skills. The staff here are dedicated to both looking after and teaching children with a variety of physical and mental handicaps. Katrina's disability, caused by Down syndrome, is relatively mild. Some children, though, have handicaps that are much more profound. We often like to categorize people. Most of us like to think of ourselves as normal, without ever asking what normal is. Katrina will never rob a bank. She'll never embezzle or cheat. That's what normal people do, isn't it? It's unlikely that she'll ever become a drug addict or commit criminal acts of violence. Again, that's what normal people do. The truth is that we're all handicapped in some way or other. We all have weaknesses of personality or temperament, as perhaps you've experienced in your own home tonight. The New Testament puts it this way: all have sinned and have fallen short of the glory of God. The only difference between children such as Katrina and the rest of us is that we try to hide our handicaps while she can't. But they're there all the same. Good night. Albania is a mountainous country in the southeast of Europe. For 50 years it was governed by the hardline Stalinist leader Enver Hoxha, who closed its borders, outlawed religion, and plunged its people into poverty. I've recently come back from Albania, having helped distribute a truckload of clothing, food and medical supplies to 3 hospitals there. The people of Eastwood, a district to the south of Glasgow, raised £90,000 in just 8 weeks. Schools, churches, mums and toddlers groups, companies and individuals all played their part. Gradually everything came together. Clothes were sorted, logged and priced. Drugs were ordered, toiletries were packed, baby foods were donated for the children's hospital, and beds were given for the maternity unit in Tirana. And on the day of departure, everybody lent a hand to load the truck. This week, I'd like to share my trip with you, the experience of working together here at home in getting the truck filled, and the experience in Albania of meeting people in the direst of poverty. It was Jesus who said, "As you do it for the least of these my brethren, you do it for me." Our story this week is about some of our European brethren who for 50 years have been kept in darkness and only now are coming into the bright light of a new European day. So do join me tomorrow. Good night. When we launched Albanian Children's Aid, we were overwhelmed by the response of ordinary people all over Scotland. Here are just some of the letters we received. Please accept this £10. It's not very much, but as I am a pensioner, I just wish I could give more. Just a small gift. Having lost 2 of my own, I hope this will bring luck to all. In memory of John. After reading the article in the paper, a few of us housewives in Blainfield had a small coffee afternoon and raised £81.
God our Father, we give thanks for the response of so many people to the plight of others. We give thanks for this lorry, for the initiative behind it. We ask now for your blessing to be upon it as it travels, upon those who...
Our truck and others like it will bring encouragement and hope to the people of this beleaguered country. Members of our community here in Eastwood came together for a common purpose to help members of another community far away, people whom they will probably never meet. But a sick child is a sick child, whatever the country of its birth. And we can all identify with a child who is ill and with parents who can only watch and wait. We live in a new Europe now, and Albania, after years of isolation, is ready to join us. Good night. Hello. This is the door of the church where I'm the minister, St Aidan's Episcopal Church in Clarkston, on the south side of Glasgow. Church doors can be off-putting. When they're closed, they shut people out, and often they keep our petty prejudices in. But church doors are very little different from any other doors, really. We don't know what goes on behind them or what secrets are guarded by them. Time was when we used to leave our doors open so that the neighbours could pop in for a cup of tea and a chat. Car doors, shed doors and front doors could be left unlocked in perfect safety. For most of us nowadays, that's no longer so. The threat of theft and violence compels us to lock our doors against the thief and the intruder. The trouble is, by doing so, we also keep out the friend and neighbour. Time was when church doors could be left unlocked too, and people could come in for a moment of quiet and prayer. Not so anymore. Our doors have to be kept locked, just like yours. It's all the more important, then, that when church doors are open, there's a real welcome for the visitor and the stranger. So may the doors of my church and yours be wide enough to welcome all who enter, and be narrow enough to shut out all envy and pride. And may that be true of your own front door and of mine. Good night. Hello. Tonight we've come through the door of St. Aidan's Church here in Clarkston, and this is the font. The way into church life for many of us is through baptism, either our own or that of our children. We gather round a font like this to affirm our own faith in Christ and to make promises on behalf of our children or godchildren. Water is the sign of new life. Every gardener knows that without it, plants will wither and die. We've seen on television news the results of drought. If there's no water, then death will soon follow for plants and for people. So when we come to the font, we're expressing our confidence in life, in the life of the newborn child, in the life of the family, in the power of life over death. And we claim Christ's promise that in him there is a quality of life that cannot be found elsewhere. Children are welcomed into the life of the church at a baptism service, but they don't always find a welcome in the life of the church afterwards. Sometimes they cry too much and people frown, or they prefer their own kind of hymns and some people get upset. They make demands that some people just can't or won't meet, and then they fall away. But the promise of baptism is that every child has a place in the love of Christ and therefore of his church family. And so do you. Good night. Like many of you, I like reading newspapers. My day hasn't properly begun until I've at least scanned the day's headlines. It's an important part of my routine. And at the end of the day, another important part of my routine is to read a book, usually a whodunit, or perhaps a travel writer's account of a journey through some distant land. The printed word is important to all of us. Papers, books, and magazines are a part of our everyday lives. And that's why in every church the Bible is important. Lessons are read from it and sermons are preached to explain it. Like my newspaper, the Bible informs me, it stimulates me, and sometimes even enrages me. And like my book at bedtime, the Bible calms me down and gives me comfort. But unlike other forms of the printed word, the Bible has a special quality. It speaks of the sacred because it is sacred. It's been hallowed by centuries of use. It's holy because through its pages, God himself speaks to us. In St. Aidan's, we read the Bible expecting God to speak to us through it. And it's this sense of expectancy that can make it so exciting. Seek and ye shall find, said Jesus. Knock and the door shall be opened to you. I still read my daily newspaper and the magazines that come through the door, but it's in the Bible that I find the reading that's the most challenging of all. Good night. One of the most pleasant activities in life for me is to share a meal with my family or friends. With two small children, family mealtimes in our house can be noisy and busy. But for my wife and I, they are precious times when we can all be together. The purpose of a meal is not just to feed the body. Mealtimes can also strengthen our sense of belonging to one another. They can be moments of deep understanding and friendship. So when you come through the door of a church like St. Aidan's here in Clarkston, you'll find at the front a meal table just like this one. And here, Sunday by Sunday, members of the congregation gather round this table for a meal, for Holy Communion. We take some bread and a small measure of wine and commemorate the Last Supper that Jesus had with his disciples. But in this meal, Jesus is alive in the present moment for all who gather here. When all the children are in church, it can be a noisy and busy meal, just like home, but it's just as precious. At other times, it can be quieter and more intimate. But the scandal of Christian disunity is that members of the same family don't yet gather round the same table. My prayer is that it won't be too long before we have communion in diversity. This is the Lord's table, not ours. He is the host and we are his guests, and this is where we all belong. Good night. Hello. I believe in teapots, and churches like ours here at St. Aidan's in Clarkston have lots of them. You see, for me, a teapot represents concern for others. If I go and visit someone in their home, I'm invariably offered a nice cup of tea. If someone is under the weather, a friend is bound to say, never mind, I'll make you a nice cup of tea. If you come home from work tired and irritable, 10 to 1, you'll put the kettle on and make yourself a nice cup of tea. For most of us, a nice cup of tea has come to symbolize concern and caring, perhaps even love. Time and again, Jesus taught his disciples that a mark of their discipleship would be the way that they would care for one another. We haven't got it right yet. We have to go far beyond the teapot if we're going to care for those in the deepest of needs. And we have to go beyond dealing with the symptoms to challenging the causes of that need, and that's dangerous ground. We live in a materialistic society where things often matter more than people. We work in jobs where perhaps we are a unit or a number rather than a person. We live in a well-off Western nation where the majority of humankind is saddled with debts that can't ever be repaid. But the teapot is a constant reminder to me, and I hope to my own congregation, that we're here to serve one another, whatever the need and wherever we might find it. So good night, have a good weekend, and go on, make yourself a nice cup of tea.